The AU's second shortcoming is its lack of capacity to develop, fund, and implement the instruments to guarantee and monitor any of its grand continental schemes. These are the sentiments of Innocent Madao, a Zimbabwean journalist in exile in Canada. Is the AU a defunct body? Does it really have a say in African matters? Today we explore this on Point of View. My guest will be transitional justice expert from the ICJ, Mr. Edigah Kavulavu. Join us after this short break. I'm your host, Linda Kroeger, and this is Point of View. Welcome back to Point of View. Today in studio with me is Mr. Edigah Kavulavu with the International Commission of Jurists and a transitional justice expert. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Now, going into our first segment, maybe give us a brief overview of the AU session that was in Gambia. You had the privilege of being invited and attending. Give us an overview.
Thank you very much. I attended the African Union Commission session, which happens twice yearly. And this session gives the NGO sector working in human rights, as well as governments, just to report on the human rights situation in their countries. And as a result, you find that these governments and civil society can make recommendations regarding quite a number of human rights atrocities. During this commission, the commission came at a time when very many African countries were going through war. For example, we had the situation in Burundi, we have Central African Republic, among others. And it came at a time when Kenya was going through a very sad time. We had the Garissa attacks. So these are some of the issues that were highlighted during the African Union Commission session.
Wonderful. And maybe what was the feedback on the ground? What was the perception given the large number of countries attending and having their representatives within?
The AU still has a lot of work to do because for very many years in existence, you find that we have very many very good legal documents, but on the ground you find that quite a number still needs to be done. We can say that the African Union and other regional mechanisms act as complementary mechanisms to domestic mechanisms. For example, in Kenya, we have a duty to ensure that human rights are protected and implemented at the local level. But again, you find that it's important to at the regional level to ensure that quite a number of these human rights issues are buttressed at that level. But the feeling that I got from the session is that quite a lot still needs to be done.
Now, you representing the International Commission of Jurists here in Kenya at this summit, what was the role that you were playing?
Well, ICJ is a non-government organization working on human rights and the rule of law and democracy. And there are quite a number of other human rights organizations that were presented at the commission. Prior to the commission, what usually happens is that civil society around Africa come together and discuss these issues through side meetings, and then the recommendations from these side meetings are usually fronted to the session. All right.
Generally, what was the most outstanding issue during this session?
Well, there are quite a number of issues that are outstanding. For me, is the issue of terrorism that still prevails in Africa. The issues such as torture. Quite a number of African countries still have laws on torture. So those two issues for me were quite outstanding.
Okay, all right. Now, generally as Africa, as a continent, we don't have the best track record when it comes to human rights violations. And maybe I'd like for us to talk about the domestic challenges that we've had thus far. And most recently, let's highlight the Garissa attack. Do you think as a country we are equipped to handle such issues, or can we move it to a regional level, as is being proposed?
As I said, handling human rights issues is the role of the government. The buck stops with the government. But again, issues such as terrorism, we find it's a global issue and it requires global intervention. So first it starts with the country, and whether or not we are able to handle the situation, it's always important that the regional setup is put in place. As a country, it's very important that we seek for help whenever we are not able to handle these instances. We find that the Garissa attack can be it is a transnational crime, and as a country, I think we're still putting in place our mechanisms to ensure that we handle international crimes as well as transnational crimes. At the moment, transnational crimes are prosecuted at the domestic courts. But you find that in terms of our intelligence, in terms of ensuring that we can monitor such situations, it is still very difficult for Kenya.
Now, if we were to pinpoint a certain direction that we are failing in as a country in handling such issues such as terrorism, what, in your learned opinion, would that be?
Well, I wouldn't say that it's in my learned opinion, but intelligence, I think, has been lacking in this country. In the past, we've had reports, even on social media, that they are going to attacks are going to take place. But we find that the government does not prepare adequately to avert such situations. So for me, I think intelligence ranks top on the list. And then there's the issue of corruption, whereby you find that at the level of at the immigration level, whereby we have people coming into Kenya, but the government does not take necessary steps to ensure that these persons are vetted, and whatever they're coming to do in Kenya is clearly known.
Wonderful. Now, the AU session that happened in Gambia, we had Kenya presenting, though not orally, a periodical report that is expected of the country. What maybe is your perception on the whole document?
Well, on paper, it's a very good document. It gives a very good overview of what the government has done. But on the ground, you find that there's quite a lot that still needs to be done in terms of reforming our legal sector, and also in terms of just ensuring that all Kenyans are able to access justice. So what my opinion will be that in as much as the government says that in that document that it has done quite a lot of substantive work in ensuring that Kenyans get access to justice, on the ground we still have a lot to be done.
Okay, and was the, what do you say, not the private sector, but the NGOs and the civil community, were they consulted in the formation of this periodical reports?
Well, not consulted per se, but you see, the civil society usually presents a shadow report to that of the government, and it gives an alternative view or a different view of the contents contained in this report. Yes.
Thus far, maybe share with us the contents from the civil society.
Well, we did speak a lot about access to information and quite a number of other human rights issues as contained in our Bill of Rights. Of course, the death penalty, which needs to be abolished in Kenya, and quite other issues that had been raised in the government report. That we felt that the international, the world at large needs to know.
Okay. Given the major role that you as a civil society play, does the government take much consideration on maybe the contents of this shadow report? Well,
it should take consideration our contribution in these documents, because you see, access to justice or good governance does not only involve the government, but also the private sector and the civil society. Therefore, it's very important that the government takes into consideration some of the views that the civil society share. Going back and having a look at the constitution-making process in Kenya, you find that the civil society, the media, and other stakeholders played a critical role in ensuring that we have a very strong Bill of Rights, and also just to get the constitution.
All right. If they were to take into consideration the information that is contained in this shadow report, what would be the results on the ground?
Well, we'll see improved human rights protection, adherence to quite a number of human rights principles, which is very key. And at the end of the day, that is what we want as a country, to see that human rights are respected, both by the government and even citizens of the country.
All right. You highlighted one of the contentious issues as the death penalty. Now, it's still in our laws, but we haven't had someone actually executed since the 1980s. What significance would actually scrapping it off the books in Kenya make?
Well, it's very important, because you see, when it's in the books, it means that it can at some point in time be implemented. Therefore, I think scrapping it off the books, it's a sign of goodwill that Kenya really wants to adhere to regional standards of ensuring that human rights are protected. Yeah.
Are there any possibilities of it being misused? And if so, in what ways?
Well, there are possibilities of that provision being misused by a person being executed, per se. So Yeah, I will say that there are instances whereby that particular provision in the law can be used to the detriment of citizens.
All right. Now, moving on, you talked about freedom of expression and press freedom. And since we're looking at the domestic issues, do you think in Kenya we have upheld this fundamental principle that is contained in our Bill of Rights?
Well, I think in Kenya, generally we have upheld that particular freedom. Because looking at the social media nowadays, unlike 10 years ago in Kenya, people can easily express their views. But again, I think we need to put in place the laws that can really speak towards the realization of these rights.
All right. In the AU session in Gambia, was this a point that was highlighted? And given the other countries' point of view, exactly where do we fall?
Well, it was highlighted by quite a number of civil society organizations because different civil society organizations handled different thematic issues.
Okay.
And there are quite a number of organizations that deal with access to information. And it was highlighted in that session. And as a country, I think we are making good steps. We are in the right direction. What we just need to do is to protect the gains that we've made as a country.
Okay, wonderful. Ladies and gentlemen, we are taking a short break. Remember, you're watching Point of View on TVC.